Well, good evening, everyone, and good evening to those of you joining us online for Discovery Wednesday. This is our Wednesday evening class with Guy Finley, and my name is John. I'm the host for our session tonight. Glad that you could join us. Tonight, we are going to have a Guy give a talk about 60 minutes in length. That talk will be based on the topic that you see on the screen below you. And as we say, it is Discovery Wednesday, which means that it is a golden opportunity for us both here in the room and those of you online to participate tonight, to share when Guy asks us to, both our own experiences and to learn together and grow together and learn a little bit more about tonight's topic. So I hope you'll take advantage of that and participate with us. When Guy is finished, we'll take a short break and then also come back for a second opportunity to participate and to share together, and that is in our question and answer discussion. So tonight our class will last until about 8:30, and we invite you to stay the whole time. In order to participate, if you are joining us for the first time, all you have to do is use your GoToWebinar control panel. There is a question box there, and you can type in comments and questions during the class today, and they will be relayed to me and to Guy throughout the class. And so you can communicate with us in that fashion, or you can send an email to Kate at support@guyfinley.org. And either way, do stay in touch, do participate, and we'll help you as best as we can. Finally, these classes are free, and we hope to continue to make these classes free as long as is possible. We encourage you to help us in that cause. You can make a donation. Just go to guyfinley.org/donate. Eric always puts that link in the question box, so you can make a donation during class if you wish, or at any time at your convenience. And all donations made in the United States are tax deductible, and we are very grateful for your support. So thank you. Guy, would you like me to read the topic and key lesson?
Yes, please, John.
All right. Here is tonight's topic, everyone. How to release yourself from any negative reaction. And here is tonight's key lesson. Any form of some painful or otherwise conflict-filled negative reaction only persists, as such, in a world whose creator assists with and supports the reason for the continuation of that suffering.
Good evening, or whatever time it is that you're joining us. It's always good when you can join us live, but I understand that's difficult for some people in all the various places around the world that do join us. But Wednesday nights, if you haven't been with us before, we work as a group at a certain point in the presentation of the material so that we can, as a group, make a certain kind of discovery that most human beings will never make in their whole life, because the kind of investigation, the exploration that we undertake on Wednesdays is not something that you would usually find people doing at a dinner table with friends and family. The truth is, most everybody avoids at all costs what we're going to do consciously. So I hope that you will listen as closely as you can, and when the time comes for you to participate in that part of the meeting, that you will do so freely, and ideally the students who are here in the room will lead the way. So I want to help you see something tonight. Every time I speak, the intention behind the material being offered is to not just stir in you the possibility of becoming the observer of your own reactions as opposed to the servant of them, but through the gradual process of learning what it means to witness your own consciousness, what it means in terms of being able to finally release you from what presently captures you at the drop of a hat. Now, the simplest example that comes to my mind, and I want to tell you, we're going to start like kind of nice and easy. Then you're going to go, oh no. Then you're going to go, poo. Then you're going to go, I don't know. And hopefully at the end of all that, you'll be going, God, that was great. I need to listen to that again, because you will. So I have a question, simple question. Now, mostly, I don't know if this is a man thing or a woman thing, but how many of you like it when somebody runs right up on your tailgates you in a car? Anybody like that? How about when they zoom past you and there's no room, not even for a mouse, but they find a space between you and the car in front of you, endangering you? Or you're sitting there in a long, long line because there's only one lane that has access to where you're getting off. And as you're sitting there 50 cars back, some guy in a blue Ford pickup goes screaming by and slams in front of the line right in front, or accelerates to get in front of somebody else there, and they get way ahead of you. So you get the picture, because we can just say somebody cuts you off, but we can use other expressions when you're talking to somebody and they cut you off with a rude remark. You understand? So what happens in moments like that to you? Just broadly speaking, we can all say, I'm instantaneously filled with resistance and then taken over by a negative reaction that by and large has a single thought to it, that this guy, this woman is to be blamed for the pain I'm in. They shouldn't be doing that. They're all wrong. And if I have a chance, I'm going to get up to them and I'm going to punish them for their misdeeds. Even if it's just to drive by and give them the look, flash my brights at them, or just drive by and think something evil towards them. Yes or no? I want to know out loud. Yes. Now, in the old days, which by the way we have reverted to, we've gone nowhere spiritually. In the old days, the Old Testament, it was taught an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You've all heard that expression, haven't you? So that if you make me go through something that I don't want to go through, sweet God, you are going to go through something that you don't want to go through, so that when you go through what I put you through, you won't put me through that again. Amen? Amen. Isn't that how we see it? But the truth is, we don't actually choose to do that. Choices are made for us that we are unaware of, because we don't understand the consciousness that's engaged in those moments through a summary resistance to whatever someone does that challenges our estimation of how the moment should unfold. So here is an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth. And then along comes, and Christ was not the first person to say this, but he was the embodiment, as far as the speaker is concerned, of the action necessary, at least in this period of time that you and I are aware of. And he said, not an eye for an eye, not a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, love your enemy and do good to those that hate you. So here I am, and I'm a Pharisee, a Sadducee, I'm someone caught up, however it is, in whatever the religion is, and I'm all for the eye and the tooth for the tooth, because that's what I feel. That's what comes naturally. Isn't that what the people were going to do who were going to stone Mary in the parking lot, in the center there, when they said she sinned, they were going to stone, right? This is what we do. Now, what happened, do you think, back then? Which, by the way, just so I want to be clear, today it's more so than ever before. Not less so, more so. What was the reaction to this radical teaching that I say to you, do good to those that hate you and love those who despise you, that by and large, that you should love your enemy? What was the reaction that they had to Christ? Well, we pretty much know what it was. The man was crucified. Now, why do you think for a second, and this is not hypothetical on my part. Why do you think he was crucified? Because the only answer that the spiritual leaders, the religious people in that time, the only answer they had was to find a way through laws to justify their inability to do anything other than react negatively and punish the one blamed for the pain they experienced accordingly. That was all they knew. That was the level of consciousness in that time. But I ask you, and this is what we're looking at, what is so radical? You have to search yourself for this. I can't search you for it. What is so radical about never wanting to cause another person pain? Is that a radical idea? If you're honest, you have to say, well, when I'm sitting here, I don't think it's a radical idea. But boy, when something happens and someone does what I don't like, I turn into a reaction machine. And by God, it is an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth before I even know what's happened. Yay or nay? Yes. What has happened? Where we have more laws, more excuses, more ways to justify violence and conflict than ever before, instead of the basic, simple understanding that why in the name of God would I want to hurt or punish any other human being, regardless what they have done? Regardless what they have done, why would I want to hurt another human being? So if I ask you, if you had your choice between not hurting someone and hurting them, and you were actually there and could make that choice, which would it be? I would choose not to hurt them. And God help you if you in any way whatsoever think unobstructed that it is your right to hurt someone who has hurt you. You're dead in the water. What is going on that a human being is so... How many of you, if you could get away with it, would wear a sweatshirt that says danger, content under pressure? You mean, you would, under pressure. Little push, little prod, little tweak, little this, little that, little guy driving in the car. And what happens to me? What happens to us? Oh, I go off. But when I go off, what am I going off on? I'm going off on the one who is at fault for bringing me this terrible state that I'm in because of what they did. And I am convinced with no question whatsoever that what that person is and what they did is 100% responsible for the way I am reacting to them. Are we not convinced of that? But if that's true, meaning if that is actually the only way that it's possible for us to live, what chance would there ever be for a human being to know anything of a Christ nature? Of a consciousness that understands I can't hurt another person. I can't do it. Not because I'm a good person. I can't do it because I have begun to understand something about my own consciousness. And the fact that the reason I want to hurt them is because I am in pain myself. And I don't know what to do about my pain. I've always had the release valve that makes a victim out of that person, and it makes a victim out of the person who releases that pain and that pressure through the familiar eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Still everybody with me? I've tried. I'm speaking for you. I've tried not to be negative. I've tried not to punish people. I know that it's wrong for me and everyone else. I know that I shouldn't sit and be filled with resentment towards something or someone, present or past. I know all of that, and yet when the moment comes and something is triggered in this consciousness, the only activity it knows is to continue the usual path for itself, which involves the pain that I'm in, looking for someone to blame for it, and then the hope of some resolution if I can just get it all down where I won't feel that way anymore. So we can say what I'm working to here is that I've tried all of that. But of my own will, the most I can do is swallow that for a brief period of time so that I swallow the resentment, because a good spiritual person, a Christ-like, a Buddha person, they're not going to be like this. They're a Stoic. They're spiritual. They don't act that way. And so I go about trying to live the image that I have of myself, and it lasts only for as long as I can keep that basketball of bitterness underwater. But at some point, we both know what happens, don't we? We need new understanding. It may not even dawn on you that all of your work, all of your wish, to say it simply, just to be a nicer person, to be someone who doesn't take it out on someone that you love or someone that you don't even know, that you drive by and you lash out at them with your judgment. Do you know when you judge a person, even someone you don't know, that judgment is a form of punishing them. You are punishing them in your mind for being someone or something they ought not be. Can you see that? What don't we understand yet? That would allow us to love our enemy as ourselves. Simply put, to not put my hatred on you for what you made me feel. What am I not understanding? So, transition time, take a nice deep breath. This, do not let yourself, go, oh, okay, because I'm gonna go as slow as I can to help you see this. We've been talking a lot lately about how the fact that we said emptiness and fullness, that they're not separate. Remember we talked about this? Certainty and uncertainty, they're not separate. We've been talking about this invisible unity, that one doesn't exist without the other. And we've used this idea, if a branch from a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? You know how we've talked about that, right? Some of you have had some epiphany lately about that. That, if a branch falls and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? That is it's a Zen koan. It's a kind of a paradoxical way in which the teacher worked in that teaching to help the student gradually see, God willing, with some clarity, the absolute inadequacy of trying to figure that out using the usual logic. Because you can sit till the cows come home and you're on one side of it. Well, of course it makes a sound, but then again, if they're not there, maybe it doesn't. You bloop, 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 back and forth, right? But at a certain point, if you stay with the paradox of it, the seeming opposites that have no relationship, at a certain point, you actually begin to realize that what, in this instance, that teaching is alluding to is basically this. Now, I got rid of so much of this language when I was working on these notes, but some of it I have to keep, okay? There can be no object without a subject. Just hold on. Now, in this instance, there can be no object. What we might call is the condition of the tree and the sound it makes. That would be the object. Where the branch falls, there could be no object like that without a subject. Without what hears the branch fall, there is no branch falling. Now you can, and this is the part of the challenge in these kind of koans and these teachings, is that, well, you start to think to yourself, well, of course there's a sound if the branch falls. Because in that moment, your mind, in its logic, has separated the listener from what they are listening to. That's what the mind does. And then the mind imagines the sound, then it thinks it knows the sound, and then it believes the sound exists separate from the one who hears it. But no sound exists apart from the one that hears it, because there is no sound without ears, without being able to hear. Do you understand that? So what we're looking at here is, if we can understand it, is that we cannot be one without the other. Without the object, there is no subject. Without the subject, there is no object. In other words, if there's no one there hearing, there's no sound to be heard. Everybody's still tracking with me. Now the observed, is this not too painful yet? Okay. The observed, which is what? The tree, the branch that falls down. Now we're going to change the branch that falls in the woods to someone saying something to you. Okay? Now he or she is the other. They're the object, the irritating object, I might add, that we do what subsequently when that they make that sound or they act out what they do. What do we do in that moment? Well, we know what we do in that moment. We blame them for the anger or the resentment that we feel, whatever it may be. Sometimes you might feel disappointed with somebody. You might think somebody betrayed you. So here they are. Here's the object of my irritation. Now, if the sound of the tree doesn't exist without the one who hears it, how can the one who irritates me, the object, exist without the subject that finds that irritation, that if the subject's not there, suffering the irritating object, is the object there? Do you understand the question now? The one who feels subjected to the pain of that reaction. This is an important point. I feel subjected to the pain of that reaction. Now, first of all, if I'm the subject, how can I be subjected to anything? I'm the one who, in simple terms, the subject always comes before the object in a sentence, for instance. Like, he watches TV. He is the object, the subject. Watches is the verb, and TV is the object. He watches TV. Can he watch TV if there's no TV there? And can there be a TV that's being watched if there's no one there watching it? You understand what I'm trying to get to? So that the object and the subject, the tree, the sound of it, and the ears that hear it, the self that is irritated and what irritates it are mutually dependent. One does not exist without the other. We're quite sure that the other comes into existence, and that brings me into existence as someone who has been harmed or acted on by you, and therefore I am in my rights at that point to make sure that you do what? That you pay the consequence of bringing me into this conflict that I feel because of what you are and what you did. But the object and the subject do not exist apart from one another. They are essentially the same thing. This is what we don't understand. I know this is a bit challenging, but I have a story to tell you, and I'm going to do all I can to illuminate this the best way I know how. So clearly, there's something that we can't see is true. If, just for a split second, I'm sitting there and you say or do something, and then with what you say or do, suddenly I have this immense reaction to you, I believe, because the reaction makes it clear, that the conflict I'm in only exists because of the way you are. So I never think to myself, as the subject of that object, that somehow you can't be the way you are unless I am the way I am. It's impossible. What we're trying to do here is cleave away some of this insanity born out of always avoiding responsibility for what it is that appears in us when anyone or everything challenges the images that we have of ourselves. So something we can't see is true about those that we blame for our pain. What is it? How do I begin to understand that there is no one creating this reaction that is apart from the consciousness that reacts the way it does, that they are mutually dependent. How do I understand that? Now we're going to work together to build our lists and then use the list that we build as a kind of a magnifying glass or a telescope, something that we can begin to look into this consciousness and see what we presently don't see. Everybody still on board pretty much? Okay, let's bring up the first heading. It says, when someone accuses you, blames you, literally or figuratively cuts you off, or confronts you, overflowing with some kind of negativity, what are some of the things, the corresponding reactions that you have toward them? Do you understand the question? Somebody comes along and they're negative, defensive, irritating, whatever it is. What are some of the reactions that you have towards people like that? And it's pretty simple. I'll prime the list like I always do. Well, one of the first reactions is what? Anger. I mean, it's just instantaneous. Resistance is always there, instantaneously. How about when that happens, somebody says something to me, I trusted them, I've been betrayed. Is that not a reaction? I'm resentful. There's sudden big resentment in me. Yes or no? That's another reaction we have when people do what we don't want them to do. Now, let's bring you in, and everybody out there, let's bring you into our list. We'll start with Barbara. Depression. Absolutely. She said depression. When somebody does something that I don't want them to do, I'm suddenly left empty or unknowing, or I don't know what to make of it, and so I sink into what we will call depression. Patricia.
I want to make them go away.
That's a big one. Off with their head is what Patricia likes to say. Make them go away. Make the irritation go away. Candace writes, exasperation. That's a big one, isn't it? Just, oh God, exasperation. Debbie.
Get even.
This is, look, she's just saying what everybody does. Get even. Get even no matter what. Debbie.
Superiority.
When somebody does that, I sit there and I rise above them and I can see what an idiot they are. I feel superior. Terry.
Self-pity.
Sometimes I just fall into self-pity, very close to depression, isn't it? On the list, Nick says, yeah, he didn't write the word, but I'll put it in, sheer disbelief. Isn't that right? What are you kidding me? Are you talking to me? Right? Rob, fear. Yeah, that's a big one. Deborah K. Avoidance, we touched on that one here in the room. Chris. Defensiveness. Isn't that one of the first things that happens? Someone attacks, I have to defend myself. So my reaction is one of defensiveness. But isn't defensiveness ostensibly, when I'm like that, a form of preparing to attack back? I'm just circling the wagon so that I know what to do next. Leah.
Impatience.
Huh? Impatience. That's one I have on my list too. Instantaneously impatient with anyone who pushes the wrong button. John.
When someone discounts what I say.
God forbid that you discount my intelligence, question my opinion. Mike.
Anxiety.
I get anxious. When people challenge me, when people do something and I get all negative, I get anxious. Over to the list. Claudia says, set them straight. Carl says, indignant. Tony, yes, defensive. Isabella, I want to run. Confusion. How about that one? Judith says, write them off. Yeah, which is, you're off the list, according to a friend of ours. Why? Oh, here's who would have thought. Why me every time? Yes or no? Why me every time? These are reactions. How about this one? I didn't deserve that. Guess who wrote that? Ellen. Okay, so who didn't I call in the room? Joni?
Justification.
Yeah, I'm instantaneously filled with every possible justification for why I am having this negative reaction towards that person. So we have a list here of at least, 25, 30 negative reactions. Everyone agree with that? All right, so bring up the second list. So here I've had this negative reaction, and we just went through the whole litany. how do I express that pain towards the person who I blame for it? How do I express that? Do you understand? We had a reaction, but that reaction is interior. How do I express that reaction? What happens to me and the reaction as it ripes through me? Mike.
There's some kind of physical.
Let's get ready to rumble, Mike says. Yeah, Mike's a rumbler, isn't he? Terry. I'm just going to give you the cold shoulder for the rest of your life until you do what? We keep in mind now, all of these actions are based in an imagined outcome that if I can simply make this person go through what? Bottom line, if I can punish them sufficiently. I'm going to make you sorry for what you said. For what you just did, you will live to regret it. Now, most of us actually don't say that. Most of us. But if you've ever been in a really heated conversation, and isn't it true? God help those that you have said hurtful things. God help them to discover that the you that said it wasn't really you, and that the you that it fell on did not have to take that in and turn that grain of sand into some kind of dark black oyster pearl. You don't know what stays in the minds of people when you are cruel to them, how parts of them cannot wait, who first engaged you in that conversation to produce that crumb that turns into a conflict for the rest of their life, that they never look at you and see you again without that coming up given the right circumstances. Yes or no? And then we live in that conflict because now I know every reason why you're wrong. I've got the evidence. You did this, you said that. And if you hadn't done that and said that, then I wouldn't feel the way I do now. So that something in us actually goes into memory to pull from the content of past negative experience with other people that which is required through association to prove to us that they deserve to be punished more so than ever before because they're still doing the same thing they did the last time. Yes or no? Out loud.
Yes.
Oh, some people wrote in. Yeah, what do we do? Yes, of course. Sit down and stew with a glass of wine. Guess whose butt is in the broiler when you're doing that? It's you. How about make them feel my pain? That's pretty much what we're looking at. Complain. This is a good one. Complain to others about what they said and what they did. Now, when you complain to others about what someone did to you, what are you experiencing when you complain to them about what you wish never happened to you? What are you actually experiencing in that moment? Anybody? I'm reliving it. And the more I complain to others about the conflict that you made me go into, the more conflict I'm in because I can't escape. And the more I can't escape, what my own consciousness is producing. So I'm sitting there and resisting the result of a consciousness that resists the content of itself. And I don't know what else to do but what? Blame you. It's all I know to do, isn't it? All right, so that's enough of our lists. We can see without too much exaggeration, can't we? That there is something that is easily set off, content under pressure, and that when it's set off, then it usually has a certain set of reactions. And by the way, depending on your type, and how mechanical a human being you are, which everyone is, you only have, you've got like 7 reactions. That's it. But each time you have them, they're blamed on something seemingly new or deeper than the darkness you were in before. So it seems like it's altogether a new experience. But there is no new negative reaction. Ever. Because every negative reaction is the regurgitation of a consciousness that doesn't know what to do with the pain that it's blaming on another person. We're all working on this, right? Mutually dependent. I want to keep coming back to that. Now, make them pay. Make them pay. The corresponding pound of flesh. Now, do you think to yourself that you're a flesh peddler? Do you? I mean, no, really, do you think to yourself like that? And yet, if you really see it, When you're sitting there and you're roasting someone in your mind, they might not even be alive anymore. You're still trying to exact a pound of flesh for whatever the feeling is that you blame them for. Is that not true? Take a deep breath, another transition. Ready? Has that approach ever made your life any better? Has it? Now, be careful, because if it didn't somehow give me some relief, why would I keep doing it? So in the midst of that reaction and me going through the iteration of whatever I do, blaming you and trying to figure out how to make you sorry and change them, and how could people be like that? By God, when I rule the world, I swear to God that won't happen anymore. In that moment, what's happening? I am once again identified with a reaction that I blame you on, not able to see that I couldn't be having that reaction or be identified with it if it weren't already built into the subject, subject-object, mutually dependent. Have you ever freed anyone that you know through your negative reaction to them? Please, I'm quite serious. Has anybody become a better human being because of the way that you treated them when you were punishing them? Now, again, you have to be careful, because from time to time, some of you scare me. I think you can't lie to yourself. Why won't you go tell somebody something that needs to be done, or there's a problem, or say no to somebody? Why won't you do that? Because there is something in you that is afraid to death that if you say that or do that, all hell is going to break loose. So when it comes to people that I'm trying to make into what I want them to be, they look at me and they want something from me. They still need something from me. So I'm going to do my best. I swear to God, sweetheart, I'm never going to be like that again. You know what that's like, to make promises you can't keep, and that man or that woman can't keep their promise either. They keep it until what? They keep it until a time comes when the pain they're in because of what they blame you for exceeds their fear of setting you off. That's how long I keep that, until I can't keep it anymore. And then when I can't keep it anymore, what happens? I explode. The resentment that has been building and building finally overflows the bank. And then where are we? Where am I in that moment? Where am I in that moment? Has one thing changed about my consciousness? Or am I still living from a consciousness, a divided consciousness, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth? I'm still living from that divided, the duality of a mind in the dark of itself. I'm still living in the dark. I'm bringing up this idea of darkness now to explain something, because I'm going to give you how do I say this? I'm going to tell you a story in a moment or two to help clear that up. Okay, so we're sure, I hope, that we've proven to ourselves that when we feel like what they have done, we feel in that moment our reaction to that person and all of the subsequent justifying negative associations that attend that conclusion. Yeah? They should be punished. What's the one thing, transition, what's the one thing that never occurs to us in those moments, that we never experience? What's the one thing that we never experience in the throes of that negative reaction of trying to change or punish that person? What's the one thing we never change, never experience in that moment? You want us to try it? Patricia, what is it?
Seeing their pain.
She said seeing their pain.
Similarity.
Seeing similarity. These are right answers, but there's, and again, this is all inclusive. No. Look, I can't change you. And the truth is that it's glorious to think to myself, well, I'm going to be aware of their pain. How can I be aware of your pain when I have no awareness of my own? Because I'm not aware of my pain. I'm aware of what you did that makes me feel the way I do. And the way I feel has nothing to do with the awareness of my pain. What I have is an awareness of what I have to do to you to get rid of my pain. Do you understand the difference? This is a critical juncture in the talk. In that moment, I have never had the experience of how it feels to wish pain or suffering on another human being. I wish it all the time. I'm using the word I carefully. You do this, I wish pain on you. You say that, I wish suffering on you. I wish that you see how wrong you are and that you suffer for seeing the way that you are. Is that not true? And I have never in my life, I'm speaking I for you, I've never in that moment actually felt from myself, in myself, dear God, what is this feeling of wishing that someone else suffers? Because that's exactly what's going on, isn't it? How do we get to a place where we can try to exact a pound of flesh, want somebody to suffer, and have no idea at all what that feeling is in us, let alone what we do to that other person when we talk to them from those tones, or any of the lists that we went through to illustrate the ways in which we follow up these negative reactions. We don't know how it feels to want revenge. We know the feeling of revenge and who deserves it. Do you see the difference? When I want to make you pay for my suffering, I have no awareness whatsoever of my actual state. What I am aware of is what I'm being given as responsible for the pain that I'm in, which is always connected to you, what you did or didn't do, what you said or did not say. That's all I know. I am a man, I am a woman who is completely divided into subject and object as apart from each other. Do you see? The simplest way to say it is in moments like that, I have absolutely no idea what it feels like to be me in that moment. I know the feeling I don't want, in quotes. I know what I don't want, but I don't know the actual feeling of myself. And what is we have to do a little extrapolation one day, and we're just using words. One day you won't have to make any such extrapolation. What is the feeling of myself when I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to punish you, when I'm lashing out using clever tones or bringing up the past or producing pictures in your mind, product of all that I've seen or didn't want to see? What is my nature like in that moment? What do you think it's like? It's called hell. Is there love? Is there any form of love in a nature that wants someone else to suffer for what they did? Yeah, but see, I have an image of myself as being a loving human being, don't you? You know, I'm a spiritual person. I've been on the path for 64,000 years, and by God, I'm loving. Just ask me. I'll show you love. I'll show you loving. Yay or nay? And because we have never felt, we've never observed the nature that feels that way, we've never witnessed the actual consciousness that is righteously involved in figuring out how to cause you pain, never actually touched it. And because I've never touched it, I've never experienced the violence in it, the darkness in it. These are words. If you can, don't miss Insight Time. I'm going to talk at great length on Saturday about how names, words have become a shield. Every word, every description has a history, and when you use the word, you're tied to the history of that word, and you see only the history. You don't see the actual content of the experience that word describes. But I'll get to that deeper later. So in that moment, I'm what? I am not only complicit with the continuation of that relationship that I have with my enemy, eye for an eye and tooth for tooth, but more importantly, in those same moments, I've never witnessed the fact that there is something in this consciousness that validates wanting to hurt another human being. Because not only does that consciousness validate, give me good reasons why that person needs to pay for the way they are, but I'm the victim of my own consciousness. Am I not? I'm complicit because I summarily, unconsciously identify and feel all the reasons that I need to suffer, or that you need, all the reasons that you need to suffer, I actually agree with those reasons. And when I agree that you should suffer, I can't agree without me suffering at the same time. So I'm actually involved in a relationship in the dark of this mind where I have no idea whatsoever how I am agreeing to suffer and to cause you suffering. I don't see it because I can't. I keep coming because I can't. First, because I can't see myself. And if I can't see myself, I can't know myself. And if I can't know myself, I can't feel what I am in that moment. All I feel is what you are and how much I hate that and don't want you to be like that. Still with me, everybody? So how am I doing on time? Okay, good. So now I have a story. It's a prelude to the exercise. And you need to take a deep breath because some of us are going to go, that's impossible. You know what's impossible? For you to ever have a quiet mind and an innocent heart, as long as we live, to whatever extent it's true, from a consciousness that the moment that something happens it doesn't like, makes an enemy of the moment, blames the pain of their own experience of that moment on something outside of themselves, so they never have any awareness of themselves at all in that moment. No awareness at all. That's why the world is literally dying. It is going to hell in a handbasket faster than you can imagine. And all because of what? Because not one person, and I'm not talking about just the political and philosophical and religious leaders, not one of those persons, as far as I've been able to tell, now there may be, we're not throwing everyone out, not one of those persons has ever actually experienced what it's like to hate. They only know why they hate, and why they hate is proof that someone should be hated because it's predicated on their understanding of what love and goodness is. Do you see it with me? Until a man or a woman, blessed are those that mourn, blessed are the poor in spirit, until a person actually begins to realize that I've been complicit my whole life with a consciousness whose sole task is the continuity of continuing these relationships. I don't need a new place. I've got old enemies and I've got new. I got enemies wherever I go. The guy that looks at me funny is my enemy. I judge him instantaneously. And the world can't wait to produce those kind of impressions so as to set you against them and to want to punish them. What happens when the world is divided in two and each half of the world wants to punish the other? What happens? War. Because I don't know what side you're on, but I'm on the right side. What side are you on? Well, I don't know. Let's negotiate. Well, that's another whole story. Okay, here's the story. I think it's in the Relationship Magic book. This is a little bit of a deeper look at, a kind of a derivation of a story that I told, that I wrote in that book, but I'm retelling it in a new way with some new insight into the ideas that we're looking at. So here we are. So here's another day, man and a woman having what? Another argument. Could be something overt, or it could be something as simple as, I really didn't like what he said. I really didn't like it, but I'm going to be stoic right now. I'm not going to let on how much I didn't like it, because I don't want him to know that I didn't like it. Fill in the blanks. Another conflict between two people, whatever that is. But in this instance, a man and a woman. Now, in the magic book, in the relationship magic book, she's had a bad 20 minutes prior to catching him with his hand seemingly in the cookie jar when he's supposed to lose weight. And she didn't know that he was putting the cookie back because he meant to keep his promise, but she saw him with the hand in the jar. And when she did, what did she do? Well, she was in a lot of pain to begin with. That's the thing that nobody understands. Content under pressure. There's never a moment that this consciousness, because it's in conflict in itself, isn't under pressure. So he comes down, catches it, and what does she do? She lights into him, right? And when she lights into him, what does he do? Well, what happens when someone lights into you? What happens to you? And they begin to have this fight like they've always had. Only in this instance, something else happens. They're sitting there, and when you're having an argument, isn't it just one-upmanship? You said this, and if you hadn't said that, I wouldn't be like that. Well, I wouldn't be like this if you hadn't have done that. And all the time trying to prove one way or another that I'm right, basically, and you need to see where you're wrong. Because if you'll see where you're wrong, I don't have to punish you any further with my attitude. Sweet planet, isn't it? So there they are, each trying to prove the other person wrong in this fight. He's busy trying to explain. I wasn't going to eat a cookie. I wasn't, I swear to God. But you question my promise. I never break a promise. So he's on the defensive, she's on the offensive. And is that called what? War. There they are in the midst of it over and over, and all of a sudden, he says, that's enough. Which, by the way, instantaneously irritates her. Because she thinks he's cutting her off, like, that's enough. But he didn't say it like that. He said, that's enough. What do you mean, that's enough? You're not getting away with this, mister. Caught you with the hand in the cookie jar. No, that's not what I mean when I say that's enough. What I mean is, I'll go first. You go first at what? No, nobody goes first. If anybody's going first here, it's going to be me, because I'm the one who's been wronged by your incredibly negative attitude. You get the whole drift. I don't want to build this up too much further. He says, no, that's not what I mean. He says, if we don't bring an end to this pain, always trying to prove the other person is the one at fault and responsible for the conflict that we're in again, it's never going to end. She says, I don't understand. What does that mean? What's that got to do with I'll go first? And what are you going to go first at? He said, I simply mean this pain has no ending unless one of us ends our unconscious relationship with it first. I don't understand. How are you going to do that? Because I'm going to be the first to give it up. I'm going to be the first to die to the part of myself that always has a problem every time you have one. I'm going to bring the whole thing to an end because I'm going to bring my involvement in it, as I've always been in it, to an end. How are you going to do that? He said, tell you the truth, I don't know. I just know that it has to be done. Because if it isn't done, we're done. When he says, I'm going to be the first, how could he come to that idea that he has to be the one who is first to consciously suffer what has been an unconscious pain. How is that possible? Unless, as I've been trying to show you tonight, unless he suddenly became aware of the fact that it wasn't just her pain and it wasn't just his pain, but it was a pain that had kept going and going and going because each of them believed the other was responsible for it. And suddenly he does what? He is aware of what it feels like in that moment to want to punish her. He's aware of what it feels like in that moment to be someone who in some form of passive-aggressive commentary wants to make sure she never again talks to him like that. He suddenly is fully, to whatever extent it's true, aware of his own state that he had never been aware of before because his state before was predicated on resistance to her reaction. Following me? Now that's what it means to do good to those that hate you. Because it's hard. Aren't you sure that there are, and I know I can feel the struggle. I already see the questions coming in. We always have this idea of that, yeah, I get it, but there are exceptions to this. Yes or no? There is exceptions to this because I know somebody that is so hateful, it's unbelievable. And you can't possibly mean that person too. Oh, yes, I do. Oh, yes, I do. Now, I want to tell you something. It makes no difference how far out of your reach you think that is. I tell you firsthand that it is possible for you to be so aware of what you are wanting someone else to feel that you finally feel that's what you are in that moment, and that you cannot want to punish another human being without having first punished yourself. Judge not that ye be not judged. It's impossible. So now, to wrap up this part of the exercise, what did he say? I'll go first. I'll be the first. What does it mean? How do I become the first? How many of you assume you'll probably have an argument, you'll be negative with somebody pretty quickly if you're not already negative with me for giving this talk? Today we had a snowstorm. And my wife and I, we live up on top of a small mountain, and it's covered with pine and madrone and oak. And when it snows like that, maybe 2-3 inches on the ground, all of the trees are decked in their finest white. It's so immaculate, so quiet. And that's beautiful in and of itself. But then comes what I love, the next part of that beauty. I call it the second snow. Especially this time of the year. And it's extraordinary that we see things and we never take the impression, as precious as it is, to understand the principle behind the impression. No impression exists without the principle responsible for it being placed in your mind and heart. So the second snow is what happens when, there it is, it's cold, dark, kind of cloudy, and then for whatever reason, there's a little patch of blue. And when there's that little patch of blue, there's this little bit of sunlight that comes through. And less than 1 degree warmer, less than 1 degree colder, I don't know how the right language, the minute that the air and the sunlight warms up by the most infinitesimal amount, the snow starts to fall off the tree. That's what I call the second snow. And in some ways, it's even more beautiful than the first snow because it's much more dynamic. It's much more active. And you sit there and you watch all of this snow. Why is that snow falling from the branches? Because of 1 degree, because of one bit of light that touched that snow. One photonic engagement. the engagement of 10 more photons than the moment before. That's how minute the difference is if they ever measured that. That's how minute the difference is that that light makes. And what is that light making happen when it touches these trees? All the trees are releasing their burden. One degree, less than 1 degree. Just that much more light. And everything that was in place is suddenly transforming. Do you understand that? If that's true when it comes to that snow and that branch that's laden with it, and the little bit of light that causes that branch to suddenly release that snow and let it fall into another beautiful movement, the continuation of its own existence, how much more so would that be true for you and I if by 1 degree I was willing to discover what was going on in those moments where I'm angry with someone? If by 1 degree I was willing to explore just a little bit, by 1 degree, instead of the summary reaction and blaming and then trying to punish, by 1 degree, just the remembrance, the 1 degree of a remembrance that none of that has worked. 1 bit of light that didn't exist before, because instead of being captured by the darkness that always contains its own reaction and carries itself away, instead of that, I'm present. I observe for that moment. I bring the light of that awareness into that consciousness. That's it. No matter how poorly it is. 1 degree, I'm telling you, changes everything. And you will experience something released that you couldn't know before, because what will you realize? Well, you know what? I've never been aware of how this actually feels to hate. I've never actually been aware of the feeling of resenting. I've never known the feeling. I've only known who I resented and why I resented them. The actual experience of the moment was never mine, and it wasn't. It belonged to a consciousness that created the seeming division between subject and object, a consciousness that cannot understand mutual dependency, that you can't have one without the other. And when you start to see that, you're no longer tempted, carried off into that idea of judging and blaming and hating and finding reasons why you are right and they're wrong. You can't do it anymore, because now the observer and the observed, another way of saying it, object and subject, observer and observed, now they're no longer separated by a mind that always separates them so that it can run the show and tell you what to do and how to make someone else suffer for what they did to you. No one is making you suffer. No one is making you suffer. That doesn't mean that you don't suffer. It means that you don't understand the nature of the suffering at all, let alone the gift of discovering that in that moment, I would rather die than make you suffer. And I will die. I will die. I'll be first. Isn't that what Christ's life represents? I'll be first. I'll be the one who goes through the necessary change in this consciousness so that the whole of the consciousness can change. I'll be the first. I'll undertake whatever that is, as small as it is, no matter how badly I try and fail 1,000 times. It makes no difference, because the thought, the feeling, the light that makes that possible for me wouldn't be there if there weren't something it was giving me. And if I'll take what it's being given, I'll see what it's showing me. And if I let it show me what it wants to, I'll be more and more present to the fact that trying to punish another human being for anything begins with punishing myself. I've just never seen it. And no human being will punish themselves deliberately. It's all done unconsciously. What are the first 3 words? I'll go first. I'll go first. And if you ever get that far, don't look at somebody saying, I'm going first. Now you follow, because if I go first and you don't follow, this is no good. You see, that's the problem, isn't it? Somehow or other, I always want somebody to recognize my sacrifice. I want them to know what I'm going through. Why? So that if they can know what I'm going through, they'll feel terrible about what they did to me. That's not what we're here for. We're here to do the work of understanding the necessity of giving ourselves up. And the self that we have to give up is this divided mind, this nefesh, this consciousness split into endless factions. Because the clearer that I can see that all the conflict and pain I'm in is the effect of that consciousness dealing with within its world, the more I don't want to be a part of that world, and the more free I am to begin walking away from it, being released from these negative reactions. Got it? Let's take a break, come back and have our dialogue.